That whole parallel that I was trying to draw to smoking or junk food is the fact that we know the addiction of the internet. We know the addiction of validation. We understand that. That is so dangerous. I've seen my nephews go through that, where they were the only kids who didn't have a phone till they were 16 years old. They're perfectly fine now, but it takes resilience. It takes there's like, okay, there's so many political things we want to say. There's so many things we want to talk about. There's something just extremely tragic about that moment, and the fact that even after all of this, you're still sort of searching for that online validation because that's all you know. And I do believe there's a generation of people who really, like, that's all they know. Also, the situation of just pure loneliness of a person who's, if you're not online, are you really even existing in this world? Your film's controlled enough and no one's really expecting. There's no sense of like you have to sort of follow certain rules, and I think that maybe they expect that of me anyways. The fact that he's not going to follow rules anyway, so why are we even trying to tell him what to do? Yeah. I would probably never have worked with Ananya if it wasn't for my watching Gehraiyan. So, when Shakun's film, when Shakun cast her for the first time, I had to do that research. I called up Tanmay Bhatt before we started shooting. I'm like, okay, tell me. And then Tanmay gave me, he's like, here are the 5 or 6 people in that moment who are very popular on the internet. And that's the moment where I'm like, okay, I'm no one to judge, quite honestly. And for the rest of it, I had to keep telling my DOPs, like, no, don't like it so much. Which camera we're going to shoot this with? And they were like, oh, we should maybe not do it on an iPhone. We should do it with like a Sony FX3. And I'm like, no, that camera it's too good looking. Because we've made you believe that that's the real world. Suddenly the last 15 minutes seems to be the stage. It seems to be like you're watching Nella perform on the stage. When a film releases, I need to be on Instagram to be able to, because that's just what it's become right now. But I do delete the app like easily once a week. Just kind of like you stay off it. Because when you're not in a good space mentally, it's actually worse. I found that it's much worse when you use social media. I hope that comes to Indian stories right now. But I wish that there was more of a chance given to purely Indian stories to tell themselves on a global scale.
Hi Vikram, welcome back, and a huge congratulations on Control, which I know has been garnering great reviews. But beyond the praise of it, I think what really stood out to me was that it's sparking a lot of discussion around kind of the darker side of technology, but also just genre bending in filmmaking, which I'm going to get into through the scope of the conversation. And I just feel so privileged to be able to unpack this with the person who's kind of behind it, And so thanks a lot for making time to do this and for giving us something so pioneering as all your work is.
Thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, and then I was listening to someone else talking. I think they were interviewing Ananya Pandey, and the host was saying, well, anything that Vikram does, it's got to be unexpected and kind of. So, of course, but Vikram, we're going to get into the film, but I want to start with something a little tangential. A few years ago, my sister was talking to me, and she kind of compared social media to junk food and said, or, for instance, it would be akin to smoking in a few years, people might start thinking about it like that. It doesn't quite seem to be the case right now. But then I was listening to you in one of your conversations, and I heard you say something similar. I want to start there, that despite being aware of kind of the fact that it's a double-edged sword, not enough people seem to be doing something about it. And here's where I get away from the film for a second. You've got a daughter, I believe, who's 9. Is she 9 now, Vikram? Or
that's right. Yeah, she's
right. 9. And I was listening to you saying that, whether she might ask for a device or watch you on one, there's this whole element to now think about as a parent. And I want to kind of start there to say, what are your own rules of engagement and how are you handling this as a parent? Because I've clearly lost that battle with my girls.
No, it's hard. Look, I'm not going to lie. It's hard for me and my wife. It's extremely hard to be able to get. Also, just find that balance, because you want to be able to sort of like. I want to be able to tell my daughter the fact that it shouldn't end up becoming just a one-way street where it's like, no, you can't have the device and that's it, no more questions. But you want to also be able to make her understand why you're kind of like doing it. But it's just that what's that fine line between being alarmist for a 9-year-old
Yeah.
and something, but also just trying to find that balance. And I think that's where we struggle a lot. And it, because she sees us on our device. The thing is that it's one of those things where no matter how much you try, at least in my life, there's two parts to it, right? One is the fact that all my work, all my communication, everything is now through WhatsApp, through the phone, through email.
Yeah.
Everything's happening over there. She's seeing that. She's seeing the fact that I'm on my phone, whether it's by design or by desire or by not by desire. I am on that phone. And she's kind of seeing that. Therefore, she sort of like wants it. She knows all the fun stuff happens on those, on devices. On the second part, I've also realized the fact, which is true, which is where somewhere in control, whatever. So that whole parallel that I was trying to draw to smoking or junk food is the fact that we know the addiction of things, we know the addiction of validation. We understand that, and that is so dangerous because if every photo you take is going to be able to have like, oh, what's my caption for this? Every photo you take is going to end up becoming like, how do I? If you're going to start thinking that way, and if you're already being, and if we are being trained to be able to think that way in a very short span of time in our lives, what's going to happen to the kids who are growing up with this? And I think that for me, that just it's worrying for me. It is a bit dangerous for me. There's enough research that we did through the making of the film and through stuff, and you're constantly reading stuff about it. So um, it's tough. I think I have a feeling that it's a battle that me and my wife will lose at some point in time, because what also happens is that she cannot possibly be the only 13-year-old in her class who doesn't have a phone, right? It's tough for them. It's like you don't want to end up in a situation where it's that. There's a certain resilience that you wish, but again, they're kids, they're preteens, they're teens, they're all going to, be in a situation where they don't want to be that one person. Do they have the resilience to be that one person, to not really care about it? Some do, some don't. I've seen my nephews go through that, where they were the only kids who didn't have a phone till they were 16 years old. They're perfectly fine now, but it takes resilience. It takes a certain amount of like, you know, and which is where the parents like that battle of like being soft versus being hard. It's tough. It's not. It's very tough. It's not going to be easy for us.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you, Vikram. I completely hear you. And okay, I want to get into the film now. There's this one scene, Vikram, in the film where Joe asks Nella, did you really come there to surprise me, or did you just do it for the likes? And from there on, there's this whole assumption that she has that if I suddenly digitally eradicate him, he's going to vanish. And as I was watching it, Vikram, I just felt it was such a reflection on the times that we're in, and just how entangled our online and our offline lives are right now. And of course, it's a necessary evil, but then there's also this kind of voyeuristic pleasure people are gaining, peeping into other people's lives. I mean, we're all doing it at some level, no matter how much I might theoretically sit here and kind of critique it. Now, I guess, Vikram, my question is that this is really messy terrain, like what's real, what's real. And I want to start there by asking you, what was like, where did you derive the impetus for control? And most importantly, to do it without it turning into a kind of a moralizing lesson, because the entertainment quotient is equally high in the film. This is not a documentary on the perils of technology, if you will.
So it started in the pandemic. It was me. So Timur Bekmambetov, who's an EP on the film, has produced. He's been the pioneer of the screen life format. So he's been the producer of Searching, the producer of Missing, the producer of Unfriended. He got in touch through somebody saying, we want to get into India, we want to do screen life films. Are you open? And the person who called me up said, you're the first person to come. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. I mean, I love Searching. I love the format. I find it so voyeuristic and so immersive. I'm like, let's do this. And so me and Avinash Sampath started writing this, and it was 2020. It felt like a bit of a sci-fi kind of film. It's like, oh, it's far enough in the future for us to be able to turn this into like this kind of techno thriller. I think as it came closer and closer to us, kind of, you know, to the film getting realized, in the sense that, okay, I was like, because we wrote a first draft, and then I got into Jubilee, into the shoot. And after I finished the shoot, then I reached out to Ananya. So by the time we were getting into it, we also realized that this AI thing that we've been talking about and the dangers of big tech are not that far away. It's not like, hey, you're not you're not looking 5 or 6 or 10 years into the future. It's like it's around the corner. It's like everything we're talking about is either here or it's around the corner, and it's a matter of time before. And I think the more that I was reading up, and the more that we were sort of like reading about whether it's like things like surveillance capitalism, but there's about choke point capitalism. It's about a lot of the ways big tech tends to be able to guide you towards what they want, towards the creating of monocultures, towards the creating of monopolies, and how everybody seems to be just complicit in that, and it's the one who's who's suffering is the end user, is the one who's just become data for for everybody else. And I think that sort of like started to leak its way into the script, but there's like, okay, there's so many political things we want to say. There's so many things we want to talk about when it came um to this, because it's in that sense there's a bit of a triple header we were trying to deal with. You're talking about, yes, the perils of AI, and but also the perils of big tech, but also the situation of just pure loneliness at the end of it, of a person who's, when, if you're not online, are you really even existing in this world? I think that I think so that triple kind of thing. So that was a challenge for us. How do you end up making that film land at the end, where you've spoken about all these three things without making it feel, but keeping the entertainment quotient, kind of alive. And I think so. The approach was like, okay, let's. So for Avi and me, it was like, no, we wanna let's punch hard when it comes to the entertainment stuff, but also let's not hold back our punches when it comes to the ending. So our original ending was actually like we had the classic 3 act structure. She goes back, she takes revenge, things happening. We realized that that is not possible. That just was not possible in the screen life format. There was no justification for her to have the camera on in the 3rd act when she's taking, kind of revenge. And then we're like, okay, then why don't we just go deeper? Why don't we sort of speak about the things that we really want to speak about, and do it. And that's when it started to become, Joe's monologue became a very important thing for us. The end of the film became a very important thing for us. All these kind of things where you're like, we have an opportunity, might as well just like say it. And it's not like anybody's expecting. Your film's controlled enough when no one's really expecting. There's no sense of like you have to sort of follow certain rules. And I think that maybe they expect that of me anyways. The fact that he's not going to follow rules anyway, so why are we even
Love that. Yeah. 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 Vikram, that's such a great segue into my next question, because I wanted to talk about, I found there to be a very poignant exploration of loneliness and kind of trolling, and that element of things which you just touched upon. And there's this sense of the following, the likes, the everything. It's good till it's good. But then, as I heard you say this, and I thought it was so powerful, where you said, it's kind of got this soap opera-ish quality as well to it, and all of this stuff like the influencer couple and whatever. And it has potential to go downhill fairly rapidly once that kind of once something goes against the terrain. And I mean, Nella is so frustrated that and so lonely that she actually turns to AI to kind of try and get her life back on track. And would you say that's part of the irony that the film is trying to convey? I think you've partially answered this already, but maybe say a little bit more about the fact that all of this following and traction online doesn't necessarily have to translate into a very satiated or fulfilled experience offline.
Yeah, I think that I would say we've now got used to this fact of our life for a lot of people, and this happens. And I remember while we were doing interviews, it was so funny because it's like I'm talking to one person, and then there's cameras there, but behind the cameras, there's about maybe 8 or 10 people sitting there, right? Your camera operators and whatever, your associated people, makeup and all that kind of stuff. Everyone's on their phone. And that's just I think it's just the fact of where we are today, is the fact that you get like that we've created this symbiotic relationship with our devices, which, whether we like it or not, is a reality, and we're not escaping that reality anytime soon. And the moment our devices show us something a little bit more exciting than what your real life is, we will jump on it. So whether it's Instagram, where you're looking at 1,000 pictures of 1,000 videos or whatever of somebody else, or it's the fact that you're messaging, or it's your music, or whatever it is, right? We're on those devices to be able to. It's like what we're doing right now. It's like we're having this conversation right now because we are, and we've been made dependent on tech, and then we've become dependent on tech, and we've also become dependent on interactions between us and our people, and like I'm saying, validation. That validation was, which is where Nella's entire, if you look at her entire arc is about the validation she gets from strangers on the internet, to be able to start to start enjoy with Joe. That same validation makes them grow. The same lack of validation, or when that validation becomes toxic, is what sort of turns her, like into somebody who's like, I want to erase them, forget this kind of stuff, and restart. But restart where? You're not going to restart in your real life. It's about restarting my online life, because that's where I'm earning my money. That's where my entire sort of like life belongs. And so she's about starting that all over again. But it's still online. Everything stays online. And even in the ending, the tragedies are right in the ending when she's back in Delhi with her parents. There is no human interaction that she sort of like has with them.
Yeah.
And she has to go back again, and she's just searching for validation. I feel that sorry, this the saddest moment for me in that sense is when she's posted the picture of the cupcake and the 0 likes, and the one like that comes happens to be from Beena, who's the last person she wanted to be able to. There's something just extremely tragic about that moment, and the fact that just even after all of this, you're still sort of searching for that online validation, because that's all you know. And I do believe there's a generation of people who really like that's all they know.
Yeah.
And it's probably just only going to get worse.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, even in that breakup moment, Vikram, there's this sense of course, there's rage and she's angry, but it's also this sense of, do I need to amplify this because she's live and being recorded in that moment?
Yep. No, there's that, and there's also the fact that when your response to someone cheating on you is also that moment was online. You could have easily just walked away from that and started something new, but your response to that is also online. Your
Exactly.
dissing of Joe and your song of Joe and all those kind of things are just like
Yeah,
it's
completely.
yeah.
I found that hilarious. But I want to talk a little bit, Vikram, about casting. You've said something very meaningful about Ananya. You've said that you felt her eyes weren't lying. You felt that she was in fact nervous and there was no vanity. And that's quite a rare thing for a popular mainstream actor. Um, and it seems as if up until some time ago, Ananya was a slightly misunderstood actor, if I may put it that way. And I found it pretty remarkable that you've said that you were able to get over your own kind of preconceived notions about her being a star kid and, nepotism and all of that. And I suppose my question is that despite the fact that there may be some facts on which this whole nepotism thing rests, and that's not what I want to get into, but the question really is, do you think that it can create some blind spots and kind of overgeneralize? Because in Ananya's case, if you can talk to us in that context a little bit, clearly, there's gravitas there, which you discovered and which has come through in a lot of her body of work, but in particular with Control Now.
No, there is that preconceived notion. Look, and it tends to happen. I think that's the prejudice that we all end up carrying towards a certain towards what we call nepo kids. I think there's a certain but I think it goes even beyond that, almost sort of like extends into our disdain in general for people who want to be in the limelight. I think there is, in what we sense is, oh my God, there's no talent and there's no sort of like hard work, and then suddenly they get time, they get, I think that, and that disdain sort of spreads beyond just people in the industry to people outside the industry as well. Any which way people feel that, oh, people in the film industry don't work very hard. They don't do any, there's nothing that they do. They
Yeah.
earn money so easily. There's already that sense of, and I think that kind of like percolates itself down into everybody sort of reacting to whether it's the fact that an Ananya or a Sarah or a Jangi or have all got the launches they've got the jobs they've got purely because of who they are, as
Sure.
opposed to their body of work or the talent of what they've got. And again, and so what this proves is that it's not to say the fact that you don't have talent when you've kind of like done it. Sometimes, and a lot of people sort of like have gone on record saying that they actually prefer working with kids from the industry, because the kids from the industry are actually a lot more secure, a lot more stable, a lot more understanding of what the needs of the film industry are, what the needs of stardom are, and how to be able to deal with it, how to navigate that. It's not easy, you know, and so it's a bit of both. And I think I would probably never have worked with Ananya if it wasn't for my watching Gehraiyan. So, you know, when Shakun's film, Shakun cast her for the first time, and seeing that and saying that, hey, hang on a second, this is nothing like I expected at all. And then talking to her, and then, you know, seeing and working with her and realizing the fact that, so yeah, I mean, I was proved wrong myself. As I think this film has proved a lot of people. I remember, like last year, year before last, I put out a post saying that how much fun it was to work with her, and half the comments over there were like, "Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? You could have worked with anybody else." And I'm like,
Oh,
just wait. I was like, just wait it out. You
yeah.
know?
Vikram, I want to talk about the gatekeepers of technology. Like, we blame the mediums a lot, right? But at the end of the day, the film is also talking about how these gatekeepers are kind of pulling the strings, and in a sense, they're the real showrunners behind the scenes, right? And we think we have control, but in reality, to a large degree, most of us have surrendered it to these gatekeepers. And I suppose my question is, would it be fair to say that the film is critically examining their role in all of this? And also, are we left with any degree of agency at all as consumers when it comes to this?
So yeah, no, it's that is the one battle we're not going to win. I don't think we're going to win this battle, because it's going to be it's the same as when it look it's when capitalism and when the stock market and when share price is what drives every decision made by any big tech or any big company or anything like that. You're never going to win against that. And we're seeing this whether it's the Israel-Palestine conflict, whether it's anything else, it's all capitalism. It's all of it. Like, and that's always the case. Is the fact that capitalism will try everything in their power to be able to win. And I believe with so if you say whether I mean, we've all seen the social network, and we all know how clearly it is the fact that for a guy who started as his thing of saying that I want to be able to share photos, and then when you sort of like do something, you end up making money because this can go big, and then when Sean Parker says it's not, you know what, it's not $1 million, it's $1 billion, because you can scale this up to a place. And look at where we are today when in the metaverse. I mean, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or that kind of stuff, you know, the fact is that you're just fodder for advertising. I mean, what's happening with your data? It's you are data right now for them, and that's how we're going to win this. Like, so we're I think we've all made our little sort of like peace with the fact that we are little bits of data for big tech, whether it's for Meta, whether it's for Amazon, whether in India it's for Geo, anything like that. We're all so I just think from that perspective, I just believe the fact that as long as we know what we're sharing and how we're sharing it is the only important thing to do in certain places where you don't actually have your real name there. Don't put your address in certain places. Don't do that. It takes one bad actor in a situation in the big wheel to be able to sort of like have something go, you know, to go wrong, because your data is all out there, and the question is that who's really accessing your data. And that's somewhere, yes, in control, it's been done in a far more dramatized. It's a metaphor in the sense, right? It's very. Some people roll their eyes and saying, "No, this could never happen," but some people's gonna kind of get it, saying that, "Look, it's not about saying that. It's not about saying that 99.9% of the times nothing will happen." It's absolutely right. That's the security that companies have to give their consumers. But it's that 0.0001% of the chances that something going wrong or someone misusing your data, someone misusing your information. What then? Is in that data world. But again, I think with the companies, with any of these big companies, the end of the day is that when or with AI, or it's like even with AI companies right now, the fact is that someone put it so beautifully on the internet. Like I've actually bookmarked it somewhere. So which is talking about the fact that yes, when you use AI as tools to help you in achieving something that's wonderful, whether it's medical or anything as a tool. But when you use AI to replace human um, interactions or human work, that's where the danger is, and that's where most of the people are going to completely misunderstand. They're going to all adopt AI to be able to replace humans, and that's where you're going to have a huge big problem. But in the end of the day, capitalism and the companies that run AI are going to tell you that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And that's where you're going to suffer, and no one's going to, no matter how much you fight this, you're not, because these all the time when you have shiny new tools in front of you that you want to use, everybody loves shiny new stuff. And that's how it's always marketed as the shiny new toy and the shiny new stuff. And you get in and you're more invested in just. So yeah, I think, I mean, yes, the pessimistic, bleak answer is the fact that we're all screwed. There's nothing we can do.
Yeah, yeah. Vikram, now talking about the film itself, as I said in the introduction, it's kind of like a genre-bending film. You know, it's not a typical format of, like, say, a classic thriller revenge drama. And I just loved how layered it was, in that you've got the emotional undercurrents, but you've also got the suspense, you've got the knowing and the not knowing, and the AI aspect. And I really admired how you never let the human drama seep out of it. In fact, as a viewer, I'm constantly drawing human connections as I'm experiencing control. Talk to us a little bit about, maybe this wasn't a paradox in your mind, but just from the outside, talk to us about what seems like this paradox of something as dry and robotic as AI, and then layering onto that so much human emotion that the viewer is, like I said at the beginning, this didn't feel like a documentary, right? It felt like the emotion is very front and center, be that through the acting, be that through the narrative. How does one marry these two things?
I think just with any kind of like standard sort of storytelling that one does, human storytelling, you're always just following the human story. You're following Nella's arc throughout, and as long as you're following Nella's arc, you will always find the human element of the story, right there. It's the human want and human need that she has. I think so. That was one part of it, and I think that when it came to Alan, for example, as is one of the things, is that the big question that we would have with Alan was always how would big tech do it? We're not talking about saying that this is a boutique company bringing out this kind of like this little AI a bot that's going to be able to sort of like talk to you. How would Amazon do it? How would Geo do it? How would somebody at the mass market level end up creating something? They end up creating a sort of AI character that would be able to capture more people or capture the imagination of many more people than just the techie bunch or the nerdy bunch and that kind of stuff. So it's almost like that. You take Alan. Alan is a mass market bot. He's not beta software. He's not niche. And that we put a lot of work into making sure that Alan then has that kind of like human interaction, which makes him feel that he is he becomes weird and creepy afterwards. He's cringe in the
Yeah.
he's got that cringe element of the fact that, oh my god, I would never sort of like, but that cringe becomes warm, and that warm becomes friendly, and that friendly then becomes creepy. There's a arc that we had to Alan which was quite deliberate in the way we wanted to sort of like craft him. And even that it's not like he changes. That creepiness is only because of the information that we as the audience know. Oh shit, we know he's spying on her. Now suddenly he becomes creepy. Every time he's buffering when something's happening, you're like, oh shit, this is creepy, because something's kind of like going on in the background. So it's like Alan himself doesn't change. It's just that the circumstances, the way we see Alan start to change. And that was also sort of pretty deliberate on our part to be able to sort of like get that. But to your question, at the end of the day, it's because it's that Nella's human need to to be able to want some sort of solution to her problems, and I think that's what kind of like drives the film all the way to the very end. So
Yeah. And you've partially answered my next question, Vikram, but I was going to ask you about Alan, because he's somewhere between the human and the digital. And I bet many people must have thought this viewing it, that it's this liminal space that he occupies, which is what invokes a lot of discomfort every time he appears, because there's this question of how human slash robotic is he? And I loved how you described him in one of your conversations as radio friendly. And you said, he could be talking to a
Yeah.
wider audience, but at the same time, he could also be talking to an audience of
Yeah.
one. And so I think you've partially answered this.
Yeah.
Let's say a little bit more, Vikram, about was it intentionally ambiguous to keep him sort of keep people figuring how human he might be? And because it becomes eerie and chilling at some point, and exactly like you said, that when it's buffering, you're kind of going like, oh my goodness, and it moves from cringe to that. So talk a little bit more about Alan and this kind of hybrid space he occupies.
So what we did, and this actually brings us to how we shot the whole thing. Is like, so I wanted, when we were designing Alan's character, we're like, so it's like, okay, number one problem, how do we shoot this? And I didn't want it to be a situation where it's like, oh, we're gonna have her imagine that she's talking to an AI, or have her talk to a human, and then we'll change that human to an AI afterwards. So I was like, okay, let's start this challenge. Can we actually have her talking to an AI looking, like, first, can we have her talking to an AI character literally as she's kind of like talking? Is there a way we can text prompt? And we found that that wasn't the case. But what we could do is have a human talking into a motion capture camera. That motion capture camera is going to feed that data into a pre-designed AI character that we've created on MetaHuman. And then that character then has a conversation with Nella, and we're fine, this is great. And so all of that conversation that we're having is live. It's actually like when we were shooting it, she's on her laptop. Apar Shakti, who's playing Alan, is in another room and he's talking to her. So all those conversations having in live. So what it did was it made the interactions more spontaneous. And I told Apar, I said, like, here's the script, but feel free to improvise. Like, this is the brief of the character. If you're saying that you are going to be the cheesy comic flirt, by all means, crack back. I have no problem with that. We can always sort of like work it. So, which then feels weirdly, it feels spontaneous, but also feels like something that a programmer would have fed, X different permutations and combinations of this character, how they could end up, how that character could respond to certain things based on what, kind of things it sort of like learned on the internet. So, that's how we found that balance. The fact that it's a human talking to a human, actually through a machine kind of interface, we found that perfect balance of it being creepy enough and machiney enough, and that kind of stuff. But also, Apar's been a radio person, right? So he has that radio voice. He feels like somebody who understands how to be able to reach out to the audience of one. So I think that it all just came together really well in that moment. Then afterwards, when we started to add the buffering bits and to the edit and sort of like see how that stuff works, like all that stuff kind of landed, I thought, quite nicely.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It all just really came together seamlessly. Now, Vikram, I want to ask you, obviously a lot of the Screen Life stuff that we've watched has come out of the West. And here you are with Control, I imagine having to also think about the nuances and the peculiarities of Indianness and Indian culture on the internet, kind of how the dance reels work, how the following works, how the trolling works. And I guess I'm just curious to ask, was that part of the homework of the film, like kind of consuming some of this material? Because and is there something that you discovered about Indians on the internet in that process?
That was probably the most. I had to do that research. I called up Tanmay Bhatt before we started shooting. I'm
Oh,
like,
no
okay, tell me.
way. Oh my
I
God.
anyway yeah. I had kids from the office, all the ADs working. I'm like, okay, find me influencer couples, find me people on the internet who are doing these kind of things, who are influencing in different sort of ways. So they would have this and this proper presentation came to me saying, these are the kind of influencers you have. You got couples, you got this, you got that, you got that. These are the tech guys. These are the ones who are doing this. These are the food influencers. These are health influencers, workout influencers, travel influencers. So there was a lot of that, and we sort of like did that research, And then Tanmay gave me, he's like, here are the 5 or 6 people that in that moment who are very popular on the internet. And I went down that rabbit hole, and it's actually a really depressing rabbit hole, to be honest, because it's like people do, but it's almost like, okay, here's I'm taking a flight, and here's me going to my plane, and this is my seat in my plane, and now I've reached my destination, and hi, say hi to my mom, and my mom's made some lovely paneer for me, and at some point I was like, why am I watching? But people clearly are watching, so I'm like, I'm not. I mean, and that's the moment where I'm like, okay, I'm no one to judge. Quite honestly,
Sure.
I'm not going to judge this, because I feel that if I do, then I'm going to start to take a really pessimistic kind of like, punching downward kind of like approach to this, and I didn't want to be that person. So sometimes it's actually funny when I read some in some article someplace the other, like, oh, but why is Nella so stupid? And like, I'm like, clearly you guys haven't been on the internet. Like, you
Yeah.
don't know how stupid people actually are on the internet. So it's so that's why I was like, okay, fine. Then in which case, which is why with Ananya and with Sumukhi Suresh specifically, who's done the dialogue. Sumukhi is an influencer. She's a comedian. She's an influencer. She did the dialogue, and I was like, I'm going to leave you guys on your own devices to be able to do the dialogue, because I think it's important for you to humanize this character, dehumanize influences, dehumanize that. I don't want to make them punching bags. Let I want to see how the audience makes them punching bags in the film itself, and the fact that the Nella becomes a punching bag, and Ananya has at some point in time in her life been a punching bag. I'm like, I want to be able to see that, but I don't want to be that person doing it. I don't want to be. I want to be neutral in that moment. I want to be able to humanize them. So a lot of that came from getting Sumukhi to come inside and to sort of like do a lot of those reels and to do a lot of those things which sort of like help us just make it authentic, to make it authentic, make it real, make it relatable to an audience. So for some people that's like, oh my god, it's so cringe, but for a lot of people it's like, okay, I get it, I understand what's happening there. So I think that it was a very deliberate decision to not be judgy about any of this sort of stuff at all.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, yeah. And Vikram, you said that you kept telling the crew to make it kind of realistic, to make it look dirtier and not necessarily pretty. Why was it important for that grit and that realism, when you were showing screen live?
Be honest, because I think, and there was, especially this was mostly with my cinematographers. I think because cinematographers have a tendency to be able to make everything look better. So in this moment,
Yeah,
like when I'm talking to you, the camera's like up my kind of thing like this,
yeah,
which is not the most flattering angle that anybody should be having, right? And I'm like, but that's what we do in video calls, because we have a tendency for it to be sort of lying over here. So let's not change that. And I think that between getting Ananya used to the fact that she's going to be in that very, non sort of like flattering angle. Most of the time, it's going to be like this cast of light coming on your face from your computer screen, which is again not the most flattering light. It's all video digital at 20. It's all so. I think the focus for me on the aesthetic of the film wasn't so much in terms of like what's happening within the windows. So I was like, I don't care what costumes they wear, as long as you guys are fine with the costumes they wear, you figure it out. I don't really care about the colors of the wall. I don't care about the colors in the house. I'm like, let you bring your personality, what you think Nella would do, and take a decision on Nella. So if it's something that really screams out to me, I will say no. But the rest of the time, I'm just gonna be like, okay, this is what it's gonna be. My focus is more on the control app. Like that's where a lot of the work went into science. And then what is that app? Because in a certain way, that's the design element of the film that for me was important. How would that app be designed? How would it become pleasing? How would it feel to be in the correct moment of the zeitgeist where it's like it doesn't feel version 1.0 enough, but it doesn't feel too slick to be a mass market product. It has to hit that sweet spot in the middle from a look perspective, from an accessibility perspective, from the way we sort of that's where a lot of my focus went. Is like it was in the sounds that the control app would use. I was like, there shouldn't be the sounds in the app should not be anxiety inducing, because that's what somebody from the top will be able to say. Like, you want a sense of when somebody opens the app, they want a sense of pleasure. They want to be able to feel that they're in a safe space. And that safe space, everything in that app has to be about being in that safe space. From the sounds to the look, to the feel, to the music, everything should make you kind of feel that. So weirdly enough, a lot of the designing in this film happened after. It happened, after we shot the entire thing. So, and for the rest of it, yeah, I had to keep telling my DOPs like, no, don't like it so much. Even like in the beginning when we were like, when we wanted to say which camera we're going to shoot this with, and they were like, oh, we should maybe not do it on an iPhone. We should do it with like a Sony FX3, and I'm like, no, that camera is it's too good looking. It's not. It needs to be flatter. It needs to be like our classic kind of like those cameras that are on a laptop. It has to look flat. It has to look compressed, and yeah. So that was quite deliberate.
Yeah, it's come through really powerfully. And last couple of questions, Vikram. Now, the film, as we said, is really experimental. And it somehow reminded me, like I've heard Mohsin Hamid and Arundhati Roy talk about their novel writing, and they've called it like an invitation for the reader to come for a walk or a dance. And I find all of your work really in that sense to be an act of co-creation. Nothing is being drip fed to the viewer as such. But of course, that's also a risk, right, Vikram? And there are things to think about. So I'm curious to ask you kind of what were your guardrails or your negotiations with yourself and the team to say, this is fine, but this, how far is too far in a sense? And do you at all anticipate audience reaction, or are you like, I'm putting this out in the world and we'll see how this goes? Like, so in that sense, talk to me about whether did you see it as a risk?
I don't think anything is a risk when you know the audience you're making it for and the budget you're making it for. And I think that's always when you create your guardrails around the entire fact that okay, I can make it purely it's been pretty much I think the fact that whether it's this film, whether it's AK versus AK, whether it's Trapped or it's like I have Rajkumar Ram making film. This is my number. This is the box that I can work within, and within that box, I'm not going to be asked any questions. There's nothing that I need to do to be able to sort of like that. Um, so, but I think with everything, I think you're always looking to make sure that I don't think any filmmaker can work in a vacuum where just like, I'm just going to make this and we'll see what happens. I think so. There's a story which has been pitched, which is then between two people. It's me and the writer discussing the story. And they're like, okay, good, great. This is the story we want to do. That story then goes out to a third person to read it and saying, what do you feel? And based on that feedback, where they, oh, great, it's lovely, I love it, but maybe this is this. So it's a process. You keep working that process from story to treatment to screenplay to the point of time when then that final screenplay goes out to a bunch of people to realize, whether it's the actors or whether it's anybody else, they're like, yeah, we love this, let's do this. That then starts to become the film you make and so on. So it's not you can't it's not a process of isolation. You can't be in isolation in that process. I think there's always a sense of people around you are reacting to it, and you kind of know what you're doing, but you eventually need a team to sort of like do it. And what happens with especially with smaller films is that it's the energy of your team is as important as your own determination to make the film, your own energy or your own passion to make the film. Your team has to be equally passionate, and that passion will come from yes, people want to work with you, or yes, it's a job, but it also comes from the fact that they love the material and they want to see that material made. So the material becomes really, really important. It becomes important that the material is good and it inspires people, and they want people to want to do it. So, and I think on this one, I think it was just being able to sort of like find that balance between okay, what is I believe the format. I think in everybody, we don't realize how used to we are today of being on our devices, of being able to multitask between an email and a YouTube video and a video chat and a WhatsApp message, and you can swipe between them and multitask between them quite easily. So I was very confident of the fact that people are going to get this language of this film very quickly, very quickly. It'll take them about 5 minutes to say like what is going on, but after that 5 minutes, they're going to be they're going to be invested, and they're going to sort of like go on as you said, a human journey. Because once you're following the human character, then you're like, I don't care. Then everything else around me is just like window dressing. And I'm invested in that. But I think there was a very specific focus for us to say, okay, let's make people comfortable as they sort of like come in, into the film, not try and alienate them. In fact, and so that was, and then of course, it's like, look, the internet is, I mean, why not end up going? So the whole idea of using a Tanmay, using Rohan, using Yashraj Mukhate, using a lot of these comedians was to end up creating that sense of entertainment of like, it's also you know, it brings us into the fun parts of the internet, which is why we're there in the first place. We're there on the internet and that kind of stuff to actually have some fun and to see some fun. So that's why we kind of got in. So, and then the end, weirdly enough, the end of the film is the one where you're kind of like, what is real and what is fake? Like, is the end, the last 15 minutes, is that pantomime? Is that the real world? Like what we've seen so far for the last 80 odd minutes? Because we've made you believe that that's the real world. Suddenly, the last 15 minutes seems to be the stage. It seems to be like you're watching Nella perform on a stage. Whereas normally it's exactly the opposite when you watch a movie, motion pictures where where you're in. So I love that. I love that fact. And that's what I mean. A lot of people I know have really loved the fact that the ending suddenly becomes that you're not quite sure what's reality anymore and what
Yeah,
stage anymore. And I thought that was quite nice.
that was really powerful. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Vikram, also the process sounds so generative, which is lovely, right? Because it sounds like everybody was equally invested. But I also really
Oh
love
yeah,
what you said about the theatrical aspect when you think about it from a viewing perspective. So that's
yeah.
wonderful. Vikram, Warren Buffett talks about this inner and outer scorecard that we all follow in our lives, and kind of the inner scorecard being more about our intrinsic values, but then the outer being much more about how people perceive us and kind of living for that. And social media obviously seems to serve that purpose. Now, we've spoken about that is of the outer scorecard. We've spoken about this, but just as we wrap, I want to ask you, we've said it's virtually going to be impossible to beat big tech. But then, how does one begin to wrap their head around striking some sort of equilibrium? Also, because let's face it, it's not all bad. Like I started out asking you about your role as a parent. And so, in a sense, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are some things that you want to preserve. Any thoughts on where that conversation starts?
I think the main when it comes to kids especially, I believe the main thing is being able to give them the comfort of the fact that your life is not all about who you are on the internet. And I think there is that. It doesn't come from validation of strangers, it doesn't come from validation. It comes from validation of your own self. And I believe that is always it sounds um kind of like the eye rolling kind of stuff, but there is a certain element of truth, you know, to that. And I think it's from um uh, I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure whether it's about giving them the confidence or it's not really about that. I just feel that the question that I would like to be able to at least ask is that how does one lower their dependence on the validation of strangers?
Yeah.
Um, that's for me. It's lovely. I mean, it's almost like it's the way of like everybody wants to be a movie star. And this is the one chance for people to actually sort of become their movie star where they can end up getting followers who like them, love them, hug them in all these virtual ways, but which is great. But at what point in time does it start to become your only existence and start to become a bit of a toxic relationship that you tend to have? And I think that is it's going to be a tough one it's going to be a tough one for us. So I think it's like, let's accept the fact that there is going to be there, but how does one create a sense of balance um, between that and your real life and your real interactions and your own validation of yourself as a human being. I find myself constantly like unless it's like I need, like when a film releases, I need to be on Instagram to be able to, because that's just what it's become right now.
Of course.
But I do delete the app like easily once a week.
Really?
Yeah, just kind of like just stay off it, and because I find that the flip is when you're not in a good space mentally, it's actually worse. I found that it's much worse when you use social media when you're not, because that it just exacerbates all those feelings of the negativity. In fact, if anything else, it drives your negativity, and they're very aware of this as well. And the big tech is the algorithm is very very aware of what you're watching and what kind of mood you are, um, which I find extremely dangerous. There is
Yeah, it's very scary
yeah,
actually.
it is
When you
scary.
feel like, oh my God, it's literally caught what I was thinking or feeling. That's just,
No, it has, and I
yeah,
think as human beings, like it's the moment you're like in a bit of a bad mood, or you're feeling a bit of a downer or whatever it is. I just find I've actually found that I'm then on social media more and it's actually increasing my feelings of inadequacy more than it
Sure.
than it should, and I find that so dangerous. And if I'm as a somebody in their mid 40s kind of feeling that, imagine what kids in their teens are feeling. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you've said about, just questioning that for ourselves is an important first step, right? Because it's easy to just, whilst you're on it, there's no sense of that reflection at all.
Yep.
Um, Last question, I promise, Vikram. And
Mhm.
I want to ask you, this is, quite a generic question, but like where I started, I mentioned that everything that you create, whether it's a series like Jubilee or whether it's your films, um, everybody will admit that it's never run off the mill, and it's always something. There's always something that's going to surprise you. And I want to end by asking you, Vikram, what is the most rewarding aspect of being a storyteller, and that too out of the global south at a time right now?
Oh, I look, I it's everything for me is kind of like it's the personal reward. I think the personal reward that of the challenge itself, and this is what and for me every film, every series, everything we do is a journey, right? It's a journey you take with you, and there's the people who come along with you for that journey. And the journey has to be something that enriches you by the end of it, and enriches other people, hopefully enriches everybody else along with you as they're kind of like going along. And I found that I make films to make films in the sense of like I just love the process of filmmaking. I love the idea of like problem solving. I love the way of like being able to do this kind of things. And yes, it's lovely to be able to put a film out there to have people receive and tell me whether they love it, hate it, whatever. Um, it's look so it. I wish, for example, that we actually had more opportunity to be able to tell our stories in the West in the most authentic way possible. I don't believe that that's happening uh, for us right now. I think that whatever stories are being told in the West from of whether it's Indian stories or subcontinental stories, I feel are being told from a very Western lens. I don't believe they're being told from an authentic lens. Um, and maybe it's a matter of time. Maybe it's a matter of time of like when you get one, what happens to Korean stuff right now, where there's an authenticity to the storytelling of Korean culture and Korean people, which is out there. I hope that that comes to Indian stories right now. But I wish that there was more of a chance given to purely Indian stories to tell themselves on a global scale. Not quite happening as yet. So on the one part, yes, there is like I feel there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that front from the powers that be, from the studios, from filmmakers also by itself. On a personal level, I'm just having a great time making stories. I'm having a blast.
I literally felt that. I was like, Vikram's just having so much fun with this.
I'm
And
fine. Yeah,
yeah, and it's great when it also is received that way. I mean, either way, I know you're open to all kinds of feedback, but it's wonderful when it lands as well, right? Because you've had
yeah,
fun with
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it also resonated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vikram,
Grateful.
thank you so much. This has been such
You're
a
most
privilege.
welcome, Saba.
I have really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks a lot and congratulations again.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.